Hi everyone, Al the Psych here. Today I'm going to do a video um, on a book called Walking Your Blues Away. This is from Tom Hartman, uh, 2006. And again, this is for informational purposes only. Um, the book talks a lot about bilateral movement and dealing with traumas or situations that you're facing. And I just want to make sure that you understand that, sometimes when we're dealing with traumas, we have to be real careful in terms of how we deal with them, especially if we're not working with a therapist. Okay. So let me go over some of the notes that I took from the book, and I'll be doing a lot of reading from my notes as I've tried to condense and get what I think are the most important parts of the book. So, bilateral movement. So, bilateral movement causes nerve impulses to cross the brain from left hemisphere to the right hemisphere and back. And it produces, the way he put it in the book, an organic integration of thinking functions and feeling functions. So this integration is a necessary precursor to emotional and intellectual healing from trauma. Okay, so we can stimulate the nervous system in this bilateral manner while calling to mind a persistent emotional distress associated with that memory, and hence it'll quickly and permanently dissipate. So this isn't a process of amnesia, but it's a way of reframing the past and putting it into a context that is better serving for us. And I've talked about reframing before, so we're not going to forget the memory here, but basically what we're trying to do is kind of dissipate the emotional charge that it has. Okay, so everything you experience in the day is stored in the hippocampus, okay, a little structure in the brain. And for memories to be stored into long-term memory, they have to pass through the hippocampus. It's kind of like a way station. Okay, so people with a damaged hippocampus remember past events but have difficulty with learning new things. All right, that's the way that works. Now, many sleep researchers are convinced that when we experience rapid eye movement when we're asleep, when our eyes are moving back and forth rapidly, I think most of the events, including the traumas of the day, are processed. Okay, so the process of information management completed. When we wake up in the morning, the hippocampus is once again empty and ready to record a new day. That's the way it's presented in the book. And that's the way a lot of information in other sources presents it as well. Now, having a negative memory stuck deep in the hippocampus blocks the pain and fear associated with that memory from reaching and associating with positive memories and resource states, which are housed in more distant parts of the brain. Okay. Now, here's something I put in bold print. I'm going to read this directly. Okay. Bilateral therapies function by keeping the hippocampus and the amygdala and other parts of the limbic brain and brainstem engaged through actively recalling the traumatizing memory while simultaneously and alternately activating the left and right hemispheres of the brain. This process integrates the function of the hippocampus with the two hemispheres. Because the hippocampus is engaged, the processing that would typically happen during sleep happens while the person is wide awake, provoking an emptying of the hippocampus and the filling and storing of the information it had contained in an appropriate, this is the past part of the brain. So hopefully that makes sense. We're trying to, when we do the bilateral movements, like EMDR and things like that, we're trying to get the memories that are not fully processed. We're trying to get them out of that hippocampus and then reprocessed through other parts of the brain. So, bilateral exercises have been demonstrated to encourage healthier brain functionality. Okay, and EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing is probably the most popular, well-known version of these bilateral exercises. Okay, now he references Grinder and Bandler. I believe his name is Grinder. I remember reading him decades ago, and I never actually checked to see if I pronounced his name right, but I'll say Grinder and Bandler. Observed that people tend to internalize unprocessed and unresolved memories of traumatic events in bright, full color. And the memory sounds are usually loud and the feelings intense. Now, before I go any further, Grinder and Bandler are of NLP fame, neuro-linguistic programming fame. Now, having said that, as I look at the research, okay, a lot of the research is saying, well, okay, NLP doesn't really seem to be that helpful, but then I go to some of the alternative therapy sites and they say it is helpful. This is why I say this is for informational purposes only. You're going to have to do your own due diligence and look up this information here. Okay, so Grinder and Bandler said you might remember a time of embarrassment as a bright color picture on your left side about 5 feet away from you. Okay, and if you move that picture to the upper right corner of your visual field, and then you push it like 20 feet out, and then you turn that color to black and white, the odds are high that the emotional charge associated with the memory will diminish, and they call this process shifting submodality. So the idea is that sometimes we hold pictures in our mind, and we hold them kind of close to us and in bright color, and if we can visually shift them further away, this can actually release and diminish some of that emotional charge. Okay. Now, when memory pictures were moved back and forth, the result was that with minor traumas, the lateral movement of the pictures rapidly flattened the picture, reducing the emotional charge. So if you're remembering a picture and if you're moving it back and forth in your mind's eye, this supposedly is able to flatten the picture, basically dulling the impact and reducing the emotional charge. Now, here's where I get a little bit concerned. I've done a couple of videos on trauma, and for those that are trying to work on trauma on their own, I get a little concerned if they're taking on something that might tend to re-traumatize them. I really kind of hope that if you're dealing with trauma issues, you are going to be working with a therapist as opposed to, going solo. So, having said that, they talk about big traumas, and there's they call it a brute force method, which sometimes bring back to people the intensity of the event so strongly and quickly that they break into tears and experience what they termed an abreaction. Okay, so that's what I was talking about. So Bandler and Grinder thought this rewounding of the patient would leave them in greater emotional distress. Yes, absolutely. So what they suggested to avoid abreactions, they suggested a person hold the memory picture in one place, and while the person hold the memory picture in one place, say a few feet in front of the chest, okay, which seems to be where most of the people hold highly traumatic pictures, they'd have the person move, the practitioner would have the person move his eyes side to side. They'd be following the tip of the neuro-linguistic practitioner. The NLP practitioner would be moving a pen or pencil side to side, that you would be following. And when moving the eyes back and forth by following that pen, now the eyes wouldn't touch the picture. That was the whole idea. So the picture might be centered right in front of you, but the pen would move above the picture that you might be seeing. Their idea was that, okay, if we're not actually going to be focusing on the picture so much, but we're going to be focusing on that moving pen or that moving pencil, when they did this for a few minutes each time, at the top of the picture, not actually penetrating the picture in the mind's eye, they would reduce that traumatized feeling like by 50%. Okay, that's at least what's reported in the book. Okay, so when the patient would not experience an abreaction, when the practitioner finally did move the pen into the area that the memory picture occupied, when the pen finally punctured the picture, the resolution of the trauma was rapid and complete. Okay, now like I said, that's what's presented. I don't know about the accuracy of this, okay, but I want to present it. Now, one of the keys to doing eye movement therapy and avoiding abreactions is not to enter the picture with the pen until the intensity is below 50%. Okay, so 5 steps are listed to correctly performing a walking your blues away session. Now, you know, I focused a lot on what he talked about in terms of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, but the book itself also talks about walking as a bilateral movement to deal with traumatic issues or semi-traumatic issues. And what the book says is the 5 steps are: define the issue, bring up the story, walk with the issue, notice how the issue changes, and then anchor the new state. Okay, so instead of using a pen or anything like that in terms of bilateral movement, now we're going to be talking about walking. So let's go over those 5 steps. Define the issue. Okay, so consider the unresolved issues in your life. So then we bring up the story. Now, the story, I look at my notes here, the story in this context refers to thought patterns such as, okay, she was mean to me, okay, or he had no right to hurt me like that. Okay, so that's how you're bringing up the story. You boil the story down to just a sentence or two. Okay, and then another tool is maybe to notice the strength of the emotional charge. So you might have a scale, say from 1 to 100. Go ahead and rate it. Okay, maybe it's a 75 or something. Okay, now you're going to walk with the issue. So you're going to just pick a route. You're going to walk at least a mile, maybe 2. Avoid distractions, and you're going to kind of walk like you're power walking. You're really going to be moving your arms back and forth. You're going to be kind of like pumping them. So you're going to go there with real intent. Now the actual walking time of your bilateral motion, that where it's actually really working with you, is maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, but it might actually take a walk of 30 minutes to actually get those 5 or 10 minutes in terms of this bilateral movement processing that we're doing here. So that's walking with the issue. Now it's notice how the issue changes. So see if the images, we're going to see if the images that we have of these events, if they start to disintegrate, okay, or start to get dimmer, or lose the color, or flatten away, or move further away. So once the charge or the changes happen, people notice that the emotion they feel about the picture is now different. Okay, still possible to remember the event, but the feeling about the event is changed. Okay, so often the story of I was hurt and it still hurts changes to something like I learned a good lesson from that, even if it was unpleasant. So the emotional charge has changed. You know, something that, man, that hurt to it was unpleasant. Yeah, I really didn't like it. I hated it. To, you know, I really learned something from this. Okay. Now, anchor the new state. So when the story is changed, you want to anchor this new reality by reviewing it carefully and then observing the way the picture's changed. Okay, so let's notice that now the picture seems to be kind of a black and white or flattened out. It just doesn't have the charge that it used to. And then you listen to your internal story. It's like, okay, well, the new reframing of, yeah, this actually can be a positive. You know, now I've learned from it. I'm not going to make that, you know, mistake again. That type of thing. You might want to follow James Pennebaker's idea about maybe writing something down about this. Okay. So you can remember the events of the trauma now, but the emotions are not traumatizing. So odds are when you think back on the old wounds, it's going to be more of an intellectual, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I didn't like it, but you know, it doesn't hurt that badly anymore. Okay, so having gone over those parts of the book, I want to reiterate that you do want to be a little careful if you are going back and thinking about events that you would consider traumatizing events. If you're going to do this without a therapist, you know, my thought would be if you just have the urge and you have to do it, make sure you're picking something that is very small to work with initially and see how that works. So if you're going to go walking and you're going to be visualizing that, you know, that scenario, that event, and then you're going to be pushing that event, you know, away in your mind's eye. Make sure it's an event that is not something that you would rate as very traumatic. Okay. My concern is when people are taking on some of the issues that are going on, they may try to jump into the deep end and end up re-traumatizing themselves. So that's my concern here. So I think that is going to be it. Let me see if I just need to reiterate a few points. I just want to make sure you're careful with doing these things. Okay. No, I think those 5 points are the most important part. Just like I said, just make sure if you're going to do it, try it with something that's just a mild sort of issue for you, not something that's really intense. Okay? Let me know what you think on the presentation.